It started as a part of curiosity. They want to know what happens at a very young age.
Right?
But it eventually landed up in a sort of addiction for them.
Porn consumption also causes a lot of non-sexual violent behavior.
When you watch a porn video, you have control over yourself and you're also having control over what is happening on the other side. So this control is what people seek a lot.
According to studies between 2023 and 2025, there are 4 million websites that offer pornographic content.
Suman, 4 million really?
Yeah, and there's a study done in India which says that 89% of the Indian population have watched porn on their mobiles. And what is shocking is 57% of the Indian population have confessed to having relied on pornography for sex ed. These numbers have compelled us to sit up and talk about it. Welcome to the XnY podcast on intentions, connections and intimacy. Join me, your host Suman Raju, my co-host and co-founder Dr. Himabindu, and Dr. Maya, our in-house psychologist.
I'm very glad that you brought this topic. Even after looking at these astonishing numbers, can you believe there is a lot of hush-hush to even acknowledge that this is an issue today?
So many clients of mine, when they even bring in to the therapy sessions, right? Like they're having relationship concerns, they'll beat around the bush. So sexual health far off, porn consumption far, far off.
That's exactly why we thought we should speak about this today.
Let's get to the basic question, Suman, here. Is porn watching a sin, Maya?
I'm neither judge, nor am I jury, and neither am I a saint, right? Sin or not is upon you. If you think it is a sin, it will become a sin. If you think it is not, it's definitely not going to be that. So how you look at it is what matters at the end of the day. And then cultural beliefs, understanding, region, religion, all of this also play into it while trying to make a sense out of whether it is sin or not. But I ain't going to judge.
हर चीज़ की अति बुरी होती है. In the way, when you cross a limit, that's when you get an abuse. And Maya, there are some studies, some people who parallel consumption of porn and substance abuse to have the same effect on the brain. Could you elaborate more on it?
Honestly, it can be compared, but the parallels can be drawn at some levels and not drawn at some levels. Because when you compare it to drug addiction or substance use, alcohol, tobacco, it is more about how the parts of that brain kind of impact, right? So your dopamine levels are high, which happens even with alcohol or with, porn consumption, sex abuse, all of it also is higher. Then you also have the aspect of the serotonin levels, like I need to do this, I need to do this. So when people say people who do, who are indulging in porn consumption are doing it because they want to, sometimes yes, but sometimes there is no. So the parallels is more on the brain parts that are activated. For example, their pleasure centers get very strongly activated, right? And when you're constantly indulging in this, your brain is in one sort of high.
Yeah.
So that is why that understanding that, drug addiction and this are pretty much same because they're talking about the high. But it's more on the physiological aspect where they're similar.
The more you feed these content to your brain, the brain is asking for more. Why did you start the porn watching? It started as a part of curiosity. They want to know what happens at a very young age.
Right?
But it eventually landed up in a sort of addiction for them.
Right.
What drives this to become an addiction at some point?
It begins as curiosity and then peer pressure. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
Hostel rooms, dorms, access to internet, hush hush. And also, right, like Suman sir rightly said, sex education is something that's still not there.
Completely lacking.
So people don't know where to go. So they go towards this. And then what happens? The entire concept of intimacy is just off limits. All they see is just the act. And they don't really understand that difference between what is real and what is real. Then what happens? They normalize this. That, intimacy means this. And that's why it becomes, it moves on to consumption. And the fact that people don't know where to stop.
And also the accessibility. I mean, unfortunately, the porn is way accessible, the most easily accessible content.
The number you said is so appalling, right? 4 million. Yeah. And who's playing, gatekeepers to this? And while so in 2015, there was an act of banning it across India.
Yeah.
But 2023 has 4 million. That number is itself so huge, right? But then safety also is something that really comes in. You give your children phones, you give your young adults phones to keep in touch, but the use and abuse is definitely in our choice again.
Not everybody who watches porn is an addict. So, is there any connection or is there a pattern on people who are addicted to porn, be it any gender?
So the reasons can be various why the addiction could happen, right? Let's go back to our old, our great grandfather, Sigmund Freud. He spoke about this, right? We have oral stage and phallic stage. Like you see a child lying, they play with their genitals, they try to put everything in the mouth. This is very normal. The exploratory aspect of what sexualities are, what sex is, what genitals are, is quite normal. But then as you keep growing up, Piaget speaks about, developmental stages in people. But then when people do not have the space to explain, express, do not have enough vocabulary, have had a very difficult childhood, have had economic constraints, financial situations, sexual traumas, childhood sexual abuse, past, and there's also techniques that we see where we understand on suppression of emotions, where there is conflicts in the family, the child doesn't have anywhere else to go, and that's when they use this as an escape mechanism.
Yeah.
They create a world around themselves.
Yeah.
So what is happening in the real life is too difficult to handle. So so I'll give you a very, very odd parallel is where you go into fantasy world where you're thinking about, oh, I'm Superman, I'm Superwoman. The same thing, some of them tend to go towards this angle where they think that, okay, I'd rather escape from this and be in that world. So that is when this feels like a safe space. And that is why they don't think that there's anything wrong with it, because when nothing else gives you the grounding, it does help them at that point of time. And that is why they look at it as help and not as addiction. And that is where the line between what addiction is and what seeking help and support is something we'll have to try to empower individuals with.
Even as adults, I think there is a lack of vocabulary to communicate what you want or what you would look forwards in a relationship. That's when I think you get into porn consumption to satisfy your needs because you're unable to say it out in words.
So sometimes people have a little bit, like they want to go a little bit beyond the normal intimacy levels. They want to explore BDSM. They want to explore a little bit of, forced sex. These are all kinks and weirdness that all of us kind of have those thoughts. But then when you are trying to implement them, there's that line, right, between what is safe and what is unsafe for you as well as for your partner. And when, let's say, a person doesn't have a scope to talk about all of these, doesn't know where to go, that is when they try going back into that darkness where it feels safe that, oh, I don't have to tell anybody. It's just me and the laptop, or me and the phone and my headphones and the darkness.
So is there any way when you understand that a person is crossing the limit and when a casual watching becomes an addiction?
So there's something called as 4Cs. So what do we mean by that? There is something called as the craving. The craving to eat food, the craving to do something, the same thing. So there's a craving to watch porn as well. And then the continuity of wanting to do it, because you are having multiple tabs open and you want to keep seeing so many things. So you keep constantly watching it, and something that you and I have always spoken about, that newness, that novelty of what it is, right? So they're seeking that. And then there's that compulsion that if you're not going to do this, then there's something that's going to happen wrong. So that compulsion and this behavior of control. In the question that you were also asking, one thing I think I missed mentioning was you need control. And if you do not get it, your boss is angry with you. You got yelled, you got fired, COVID happened, you are not feeling like it, your partner is not at home. There's zero control you have all. But when you watch a porn video, you have control over yourself, and you're also having control over what is happening on the other side. So this control is what people seek a lot. And that's when it moves on to becoming an addiction. And again, this is a self-assessment. So one has to know what is and what is not.
So the continuous part of it, the continued watching, craving for it, a compulsion to see it, and inability to control. These are the 4 things that each person should understand or look for while indulging into any kind of behavior.
We use it for medical purposes, right? Premature ejaculation, if they're having anorgasmia, if they're having pain during, the sexual intercourse. And if also a person is unable to stay up for a longer time or have a very long erection, we do use this as a psychological tool to build intimacy. So here it is adding some value to it. but under medical supervision or under the psychologist supervision, where they know to draw the boundaries. So even this, anything, like you rightly said at the beginning, using anything is good, abusing anything and overusing it is when it becomes detrimental.
But another thing I wanted to get out here is it also leads to violent behaviors.
So let me tell you this. There was one particular individual who kept coming back again and again and telling, there's nothing wrong with my relationship. I am trying my best, my husband's trying. But then every day in the night, he's just irritated. And I'm like, how? And that's when I was like, so you usually in therapy, you're supposed to give people a heads up before you walk into their personal life. So we say things like, I'm going to ask you an uncomfortable question. Please answer it. So when I told her, how is your intimacy? She's like, oh no, that is not a problem. And then she just took a detour there. So, it is still considered not appropriate to speak about these things.
Discuss about it because of stigma and the taboo.
So irritation or yelling without any reason, these are some very behaviors that are very out there. Now, you would not in a general scenario think, oh, the person is shouting at me because they're not doing this. So if you take away the time that the person, so the case that I was saying about, it was very sad to see that she was able to recognize what was happening to him, but he never thought that it was because he was not able to, have his time, indulging in it. And that is the reason why he started being very abusive towards them, foul language, profane language, and also calling names. Because my pleasure is not being addressed, so you are the reason. So you are going to do it. And the research says there's a lot of married men actually did not want to do it at home, and because they were scared that the child or the father or the parent would catch them, right? So they did not want to do that. But it is said in a research in 2023 that about 89% of single lonely men resorted to this as the best way. But then again, the violence was still out there at office, at work, in general, in traffic.
So what you're saying is deprivation causes the violent behavior, but I think the studies which say that porn consumption also causes a lot of non-sexual violent behavior. Is that
And
true?
people don't relate to it. The problem is they become violent.
It goes.
They don't even know that, okay, I'm not watching porn. That might be a reason. Suddenly, there are the few people or the wives that complain or the husbands that complain. My spouse was all nice and loving and all of that, but suddenly, within a day or two, she became very irritated. Whatever I talk, she's shouting at me. Whatever I say, is not liking it. So they don't associate these two. They wanted to get help. They went to therapy. Therapist said, stop watching porn and increase more of intimacy things. They will not do the rest of the things to satisfy, but unknowingly this violent behavior creeps in.
And language is a thing that hurts, right? Yeah. When people are not where they have to be, they definitely start using language that is not appropriate. And then that again brings further cracks in the relationship. So I think porn consumption has to be a very, very willing choice of indulging or not indulging. Casual watching, everybody does. Curiosity never killed anybody, definitely killed the cat, the poor cat. But then it definitely does cause cracks in the relationship. And you may not have the strength to fill those cracks at all points of time.
Let me play the devil's advocate here. I've heard there are couples which actually indulge in porn to spice up their life. I mean, how does that work?
That's because they are trying something different. Whether there's a dry spell, whether because of a medical condition the person is having issues, whether post-menopause, postnatal and postpartum depression as well. All these other scenarios could mean that there is no intimacy in the relationship. So along with building intimacy, which is very crucial, we also bring in this aspect of when we use it as a tool, it is used purely as a tool only. Yes. So a lot of times what we do is, they're not watching, but they listen a lot of times because the body is not yet getting aroused or excited. And that is why we use it. Sometimes there is no noise. It's just playing in the video so that these two people, because again, life, stress, children, not sleeping, medical conditions, diabetes, hypertension, depression, anxiety, these can all lower the libido also, and people don't feel like having that intimacy. So this is where we use it as a pure tool. And yes, sometimes it's brought out some amazing results that we were not expecting. But what was the best part? That couple exercised caution.
Absolutely.
So they were like, this is where we are going to do it and this is where we are going to stop. So it's done under supervision. Like we are very sure that they're doing it for 4 sessions. And the 5th session we say, now why don't you try? And that's when we bring in role play. So it's trying to move out from the real and then come back into the real.
I know I'm into addiction, or somebody knows that they're into addiction. How do I help myself before even getting that courage to approach for therapy outside?
Yeah, Maya, इस रात की सुबह है कि नहीं?
Oh, there's definitely hope. But the need has to come to the point where they believe that acceptance is the first point, right? I want help. If they do not say, I want help, the self help will not come. Those people who are indulging in porn consumption do not have the strength to just snap out of it. So please do not tell your partner, friend, whoever to snap out. Stand with them so that they have the strength to snap out. Reboot your thought process. So you take away all the things that are adding to that and then you build it. And then there's something called as removing cues. So if you think you indulge in this from a certain time, take yourself off that. Go for a swim, play games, art, puzzles, friends, connection. All of that works. Best part is nature. Nature always is healing, especially in this. So one thing that I've heard or I've told clients who've come with this concern is exhaust your body physically. That's a very good technique. Then there's something called as taming the technology. That is meaning learn to exercise a little bit of self-control. No doing like, oh, for 15 days I did not watch. Let me see if I can watch it once and am I tempted? You will be tempted. You're going to slip. So it's important that these 3 techniques, if followed, along with good amount of therapy and support system. Now, when we say support system, it doesn't have to be family always because they might feel shame talking. So pick a friend who can, be accountable to you. Use your phone to your advantage. Put in filters, check out words, switch off your phone, get out of the house. Do not be at home because the moment that you're in that safe space again, right, your brain will be like, why do anything? Let's just go do this because it's easier. Instant gratification.
Don't look for instant gratification. Maybe work on yourself, your physical health maybe, and then look at the broader results rather than the small
Why not?
awards that you get on daily basis.
Yeah, and I just want to say a lot of people who actually indulge in porn consumption unfortunately don't look at themselves in the mirror. Yeah. Because you feel dirty, you feel unclean that you've been doing something that's not great. So the awareness is there, but remember, it's okay to not be okay, but it is not okay to not seek help. That is when you are making what is not working for us. Like for example, we get a cold, you'll go to the doctor. Yeah. It's the same thing. You did something, something's happened. Come to us.
Let's give them a little bit of what happens when somebody comes for a porn addiction therapy.
Right. So the first thing is we start off by saying that it's okay to what has happened because they do not have a lot of acceptance in the general society. So, and I don't think they themselves accept that I did something not so great, right? So acceptance and what we call as acceptance and commitment therapy, we begin there where we try understanding what are the triggers that led to it. Any behavior has a story.
Yes,
and
definitely.
every story is worth listening. So we have acceptance and commitment therapy, and we use a lot of the CBT techniques like rebooting, reframing, and taming the technology, removing your cues. These are all amazing CBT techniques. But also like the coping behavior that we spoke on, narration. What have you told yourself why you're doing this? So these are some of the most commonly used therapeutic techniques when somebody comes to us for getting better or recovering from porn consumption.
The way I look at it, life is in the living, and in the living of it, you're bound to make mistakes.
We are all humans, Suman. We make mistakes.
Making mistakes is part of the human experience, it's part of the living experience. It's okay to make mistakes, but do not hesitate to seek help.
And that's where we're willing, we open doors, open ears to listen to whatever you've got to add. And remember, there's no mistake that gets judged here. There's only support and an entire medical team to support you and not just therapy. But therapy always leads the guns for us.
And folks, we have a series of very interesting and relevant episodes to follow. Please do not forget to like, share and subscribe to the XnY podcast on intentions, connections and intimacy.
Speaking of interesting and relevant, Maya, tell us, what are we going to talk about next?
I think the upcoming topic is something that is very less again spoken of. I think we've just developed this habit of talking about things that are not spoken about, and I'm definitely proud of us for that. So we're talking on sexual dysfunctions, and the irony is a lot of people are not aware of
Wait, Maya, let's not divulge into too many details. So guys, thank you for having us. Bye-bye.